Hey everyone, and welcome. Get ready, because today we're going to completely flip the script on how you look at some of the world's most ancient texts. We're about to go on a deep dive to uncover a hidden architecture, a secret language of structure that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time.
But let's just kick things off with a pretty wild question. What if the way we've been taught to read our whole lives, from left to right, line by line, is just fundamentally the wrong tool for the job here? What if, by reading that way, we've actually been missing half the story?
All right, so that brings us right into our first section. To really get why this new approach is such a game changer, we first have to understand the problem. So what exactly happens when we try to read these incredibly complex works like they're just a simple, straightforward story? I mean, we're all trained to think of a book as a straight line, right? Start at the beginning, read to the end. But if you've ever tried to read something like Genesis or Exodus, you've probably felt that whiplash. One second you're following a great story, and the next, bam! You're in the middle of a genealogy or a list of laws that feels like it came from another planet.
And the scholars we're looking at, they totally get this feeling. You run into these sudden topic shifts, paragraphs that feel like, and I'm quoting here, strange inserts that just don't seem to belong. The whole thing can feel choppy and frankly super confusing. It leaves you wondering, wait, did I miss a page? What's going on here?
So, if reading a straight line is the problem, what's the solution? How do we crack this code? Well, to see the hidden pattern, the first thing we have to do is break the text down into its most basic components. We need to find the building blocks of this amazing literary architecture.
And this right here is the big mental shift you have to make. You've got to stop seeing a one-dimensional line of words and start seeing a two-dimensional woven fabric. But of course, before you can see the whole tapestry, you first have to identify the individual threads.
So the smallest thread in this whole fabric is something called a pericope. Just think of it like a self-contained paragraph, or a mini-story. And these aren't just random chunks of text we're carving out. No, they're flagged with really clear clues, what scholars call literary markers. Like, a story might start and end with the exact same phrase, which basically puts a neat little frame around it.
Okay, so you found your threads, your periscopes. The next thing you notice is that they're not just floating around randomly. They're actually bundled together in little groups of 2 or 3. And this bundle is called a row. This is the next level up, where these individual ideas start to form a coherent line of thought.
Now hold on, because this is where things get really wild. You take these rows and you stack them on top of each other to form a table, which is called a unit. And this is the genius move. This is where the text literally goes from being a flat line to being a two-dimensional grid. The threads are actually starting to interlock and form a real piece of fabric.
So you see, there's a real method to this. It's not just guesswork. You find the pericopes by looking for those clear literary signposts. You group them into rows, and then you assemble those rows into a unit table. It's all about documenting a pattern that is objectively, measurably, right there in the text.
All right, so we've taken the text apart. We've laid out all the pieces in this new grid format. But why? Why go through all of this trouble? Well, get ready, because it's about to open up a completely new and, honestly, a stunning new dimension of meaning.
This is the moment. This is where everything just clicks into place. By laying the text out like this, we can suddenly read it in a way that was impossible before, vertically. Instead of just reading across the rows, we can now read down the columns. And when you do that, all those strange inserts and confusing parts, they suddenly make perfect sense. Just take a look at this table. It shows a few different units from the book of Genesis. If you read them in their original order, they can seem a little disjointed. But once you arrange them in this grid, a hidden blueprint just snaps into view. Let's try it. Let's see what happens when we read straight down that first column, column C. Check this out. When you read down that column, you get the complete story of God's covenant with Abraham. Unit 5 is the first call, the initial promise. Unit 7 is the big, formal ceremony, and Unit 9 is the ultimate test of that covenant. It's a perfect, complete story. Initiation, formalization, and testing. A narrative that was scattered across chapters is now one single powerful, coherent message. It's incredible. And I really want to stress this point. This isn't us just finding patterns that we want to see, like seeing faces in the clouds. The source material calls this the discovery of an absolute genius of structure and of design. It's an objective, concrete, and totally intentional architecture that was built by the original author. We're not inventing the pattern, we are simply uncovering it. Okay, so we can see this incredible, complex structure. But that just leads to the biggest question of all, doesn't it? Why?
Why on earth would ancient authors write with this kind of staggering complexity? Well, the answer is so profound, it gets to the very heart of their entire worldview.
The answer is captured in one simple, powerful phrase from our source material. Structure is theology. The very architecture of the text, the way it is built, is itself a message about the nature of God, of reality, of everything.
See, for us, a story is mostly about plot and characters, but for these ancient authors, the shape of the story was just as important. Think about the creation story in Genesis. It's all about God bringing order, structure, and balance out of this primal, formless chaos. Well, the authors mirrored that exact process in their writing. The highly structured, woven, balanced nature of the text is a literary reflection of the divine order of creation itself. And this idea works in reverse, too. Our sources point to the plagues in Egypt as this terrifying example of decreation. The plagues aren't just random acts of destruction. They are a systematic unmaking of the created order. Light is replaced with darkness. The water turns to blood. Life gives way to death. It's a deliberate march backward, returning the world to that formless chaos that existed before creation. The structure, or in this case, the destructuring, tells the whole theological story. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? Why does recognizing this intricate, beautiful weave actually matter for us right now as readers today?
Well, the implications are just huge. It shows us that we're dealing with an incredibly intentional and sophisticated author. It gives us an objective framework for finding meaning. It forces us to shift from just reading in a line to becoming reflective pattern seekers. And what's wild is that these same structural patterns repeat themselves over and over, from the tiniest paragraph to the layout of an entire book. It means we have to become more than just readers. We have to become architectural detectives.
And we're not just talking about one or two hidden patterns here. In fact, this method reveals at least 7 distinct layers of meaning, all operating at the same time within the text. From the rows to the columns to the tables to how the tables themselves are arranged, it is a symphony of interlocking patterns.
And that, of course, leaves us with one final mind-bending thought to chew on. If the very structure of these ancient texts is a theological message, a map of reality itself, then what other hidden architectures, what other layers of pure genius are still sitting there, just waiting to be discovered in the books we thought we knew so well?